This is America Offline with David Klein. Real conversations, authentic connections with digital wellness experts and mental game gurus. No texting, emailing, snapping, we ain't even tweeting. We're hopping online to talk mental health, mindfulness, and how good it feels to be offline. Coaching you up and how to take control of tech so tech doesn't take control of you.
Hi, everyone. David Klein here with Teodora Pavkovic with the America Offline podcast. Teodora, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, I think, overall, for the most part, in this moment. I find every day is a little bit of a roller coaster. So at this moment, I'm pretty good.
Okay, good. Very good to hear it. So why don't you give our listeners a little bit of your background? And by the way, I'm forewarning here for those that are watching on Facebook, or if it's a little glitchy on the actual podcast, we are working through a little bit of technology difficulties at the moment. So sorry if it's slightly glitchy. But for those who don't know too much about you, Teodora, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today?
We're definitely ready to do this, but I don't think our tech is. So you're a little frozen on me right now, but I think I'll carry on talking and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So for people who don't know me, my name is Teodora Pavkovic. I'm a psychotherapist, a parenting coach, and an international speaker. I'm based in New York City, or rather that's where I used to spend most of my time working. Now I'm in quarantine in New Jersey, just across the Hudson River. And the focus of my work is in emotional intelligence, digital wellness, and parenting in the age of technology. So in my work, I've always been very interested in parenting and the parent-child connection, relationship, what are all the different things that impact this relationship. And came around, I was living in Singapore at the time, and was starting to notice that technology was actually starting to play a bigger and bigger in that parent-child connection, and it was really impacting that relationship, or at least at that point, I kind of had an idea that it might be impacting the parent-child relationship. We really weren't that clear on it. At that point, we still don't have nearly as much kind of information and data and research on that as we would like to really be able to determine just how it's been impacting the parent-child relationship. But that's kind of the main focus of my work. I'm a part of the Digital Wellness Collective, same as you are, David. I'm also the co-chair of the Parenting Professionals Group within the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood. I just recently became an advisory board member of a mental health advocacy group called Made of Millions. So a lot of my work is just really focused on trying to raise awareness and try and educate on a lot of different topics within the mental health field, the parenting field, and then digital wellness is, or has become, ever since 2016, has become a really big part of what I do, because of course technology is a part of everything that we do at this point as humans, and especially now during this period of quarantine, it's really our lifeline. So I just find it really fascinating to look at how technology is impacting us, and to look at what are the ways in which we can control it. I think we have a great example right now of not being able to control our tech and having it glitch on us big time, but there are definitely lots of ways in which we can control technology, and so that's what I like to talk about and look at.
Totally. So, Teodora, I'd love to try and find some common ground between the audience that's listening now and who you've been working with. And I'm curious, what have you been starting to observe as far as the shift or changes or challenges that people are having right now as it relates to technology usage during the pandemic?
So I think the challenges are not completely new, not unexpected. I think there are much more intense, powerful version of what we were arguing, enough of it to be able to say, look, this could really be a problem. So, we were using tech before this as well. We were using it for all the same reasons we're using it now. a lot of learning was happening on devices or purposes for social connection, for all these different things. Tech was still in our homes in a big way before. It's just that now it's really been amplified. And I used the term overdosing a couple of days ago. I know it's a very severe term, but I do use it intentionally because I think we are in many ways overdosing on that tech. And, within our field of digital wellness, we often talk about this phrase screen time, and the fact that very few of us are really fans of using it because it gives a very kind of black and white, not a kind of deep enough view into how are we actually using tech. I feel like it's starting to become relevant again because everything is happening via screen-based devices. And I don't know about other people, but for me, it's starting to all blend and kind of merge into all being, the same thing. So I think we're seeing a lot of the same types of problems are just much more amplified. So parents are still asking questions about, do I try to place boundaries on the amount of time my kids are spending on a screen? They were asking this question before as well. Now they're really panicked about it because the kids are on the devices all the time. And they're asking questions about, there's a webinar I was on earlier on where a dad was asking about, should I put screen limits on my kids' screen use, and how do I balance the time that they have to spend on the screen with the time that I really want to spend with them. And he's a father of two sons, 11 and 14 years old. Parents are asking questions about how much time should they be spending on screen for learning purposes? Is that type of learning actually an effective type of learning? Are they actually learning anything? I've spoken to not just kind of clients and strangers online, but friends who have 4 and 5-year-olds who are now supposed to be spending 90 minutes at a time on Zoom with their kindergarten teachers and their little friends. And, a lot of them are saying for the first week it worked. It was novelty. It was interesting. All that dopamine was flowing. It was all super fun. And on day 6, they'd be sliding off their chairs, or they'd be playing around and like coming out of the screen, coming back, or they'd be pointing at their friends. They wouldn't be listening. And number one, it's the expectation that we have of our kids. Can we expect a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old to not do that? Then the expectations of the parents as well, because what the parents were saying is, I was there, I was fully present for the first week. I was making sure to, prop them back up and say, no, make eye contact, do this and that. But after the first week, I just stopped and I'd say, you know what, off you go. You've got your 90 minutes on Zoom, spend time there, have fun, do whatever you want. So I think our expectations are a big part of all of this for parents. Like, what can we actually expect of our children? And what can we expect of ourselves? And the expectations have changed now, obviously, because we're all kind of shoved together. I saw a really, really smart cartoon on the New Yorker. They called it something terrarium, but it was this image of basically a terrarium with 2 humans in it, and their whole life revolving around just those 4 walls. So I think the questions are very similar. I just think it's a lot more intense now. The portion that I'm thankful for right now is that we're spending so much time on our tech that the cracks are really starting to show, and we're really starting to question a lot of the ways in which we're using it. And I don't think we were asking it quite as kind of urgently and passionately before as we are now. And so I think now is the best time to talk about digital wellness and to talk about how do we consume tech and how we want our kids to consume it.
Right. Totally. Wow. There's so many, you asked a bunch of questions that I'm interested in getting the answer for. One reflection that you mentioned, I've been spending a lot of time on Zoom calls with kids, and you're totally right in that when this all first started, there was this novelty about connecting online. You'd see kids' faces light up. And now you're totally right. Now they sometimes they don't even have their video on, and they're playing a video game in the background or something like that. It's definitely lost its luster. It kind of makes me think that maybe, just maybe, when this is all done, connection unstable for a moment, I wonder if technology will lose its luster a little bit, and if people will get sick of it, and we will start to see play return to the streets, unsupervised, unstructured play like we used to. So I'm kind of going into the future a little bit. We're about bouncing around, but I'm curious as to a prediction about how how things could evolve here coming out of quarantine time.
And I appreciate that question, because I think anytime you're as a human being, anytime you're in a very stressful, kind of threatening, dangerous situation, the natural kind of order of things is for your vision to just go right down into the right now, into I need to cope and manage this instant, which is very important for survival. But I do think we need to keep one eye on the future, especially when it comes to this topic of children and how they learn and how they grow, how they play, how they develop, and what role tech plays in that, in good and bad ways. My hope is that, like I said, that this is really going to give us a very real opportunity to look at how we use tech and what are, again, the realistic expectations we can have of ourselves and of kids when it comes to consuming tech for all those, different purposes. And that coming out of this, we are going to not learn, but really just be reminded of how important, first of all, of how the child's brain works. The novelty wears off very quickly. That's true for adults as well, but especially true for kids. What I've noticed now is that kids, when they're on Zoom, it looks a little bit like when our grandparents are on Zoom. There's all these frustrations with the fact that like you'll just see this half or this half of the face. I'm starting to notice kids are doing that now because they're not focused on what's happening. So I do hope that, yes, we will be reminded of the fact that kids do need stimulation in a 3D world, not on a flat screen. They need stimulation. They need a little bit of that unpredictability. They need that dynamic. They need to be exposed to a lot of different things, and you want to be mixing it up. You don't want to overdose on that either, but they do need that very real world 3D kind of way of interacting. I recently was speaking to a friend who was telling me about a friend of hers who's been homeschooling her kids for over a decade at this point. Mm-hmm. And she was saying, everyone is saying to me, oh, you must be having a great time because you've been homeschooling anyway. So this for you. And I think she has three kids. This is just a normal everyday kind of life for you. And she was saying it's not at all. That's not what homeschooling is. Homeschooling is going to the museum and going to the river or to the ocean, going to the woods, going to a science exhibit, going into the city, using public transport. Homeschooling is about learning in the real world. And we're not doing that right now. We're not really enabling our kids to do that right now because they're having to do it on this very limited kind of medium. So I do hope that once we get out of this, that we're in a safe kind of a way, really able to re-engage children with the real world. And I would hope minimize minimize kind of unhelpful forms of tech use when it comes to learning. There are very helpful ways of doing it too. They're incredible, they're incredible ways of getting information, of connecting to kids across the planet, to increase diversity and knowledge acquisition, all these different things. But I feel that needs to be the minimum when it comes to looking overall at how kids learn. That needs to be a smaller component. The bigger component really needs to be those real life experiences kind of in the 3D world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, at the same token, for me, I always used to, and I still do think that connecting in person is the truest form of connecting. Like you can't really replace that. But what I will say is, and I've been doing 3 to 4 Zooms a day since March 17th, I've been able to create some really quality online experiences in doing some things that I wasn't able to really do effectively in person. I'm able to do effectively online. So for instance, creating a one-on-one conversation using breakout rooms, that's been something that's really worked, that kind of takes a little bit more time and effort. So I'm just kind of curious as to maybe some good usage of technology or telelearning or whatever distance learning that you've seen. What great examples have you seen? What perks for learning online might exist out there?
Right. I think one of them definitely has been some of these features with Zoom in particular, these breakout rooms. And I know that even adults for their own meetings with other adults have made these comments, and I've used it in some of my virtual workshops as well. And it is a really, really nice feature. And so I'm happy to see, to me, that is an example of kind of humane tech and digital wellness, and really using tech in a positive way, like you said, to do something that you can't quite do in that form, when you're in person. When it comes to some other examples, it's hard to say overall, because there are lots of also different forms of kind of distance learning, of online learning. Even when I look at, some of the parenting groups that I'm part of on Facebook, for example, where they'll exchange stories and experiences of distance learning, some of them are major haters of home-based learning or distance online learning, and others have found that they've really liked it. One of the features I think that both parents and kids appreciate is to have a lot of flexibility with it. So any kind of program that allows for flexibility, that really allows you to play around with the scheduling, that allows you to play around with when you're going to be learning what subject or topic, or how you can kind of space that out during the day. Those seem to be really popular with parents and kids, as opposed to, say, we have a 5-hour session we're about to go through. So giving some level of flexibility and that kind of personalization, as it's often called, to really allow the user or the consumer to be able to manipulate that content a little bit, and to be able to kind of space it out and to really modify it in the way that works best for them. Some of the other things that I found to be really good examples of kind of mixing in immersive and fun and learning experiences are, things like NASA doing these astronauts reading books to kids. That's a really wonderful educational way, but it's also a kind of immersive, playful type of thing to do as well. You're getting live streams from a lot of aquariums and zoos that can be used for education in a really wonderful way. Museum galleries that are doing these different tours and things. So if your kids are doing art projects or doing art classes, that's something that you can even do together with them. So you can kind of co-view and co-use that tech. There's certain examples of that kind that I think are really nice little kind of add-ons that parents and that kids can use to kind of expand the learning experience, and again, try and get a little bit more of a 3D feel for something that's very two-dimensional at this point.
Totally. And there's so many options now. You're seeing different Zoom opportunities, many of them free. You mentioned, museum tours and NASA, and Michelle Obama is reading to people now on CBS. It's all awesome. But what should we as parents be considering when making those decisions as to what is okay, how much is okay, what age, what should the considerations be?
Oh, there you are.
Okay,
so
sorry,
as far as I got are what are things we should consider as we make the decisions too? Correct.
Yeah. There's so many options, right?
Yeah.
What should we be considering before we place, I have a 2.5-year-old, for instance, but we're going to have listeners here that have 8-year-olds to 15-year-olds, and they're trying to decide what's okay, how to create restrictions if they want to create the restrictions, and what is okay and what isn't. What should be in consideration when making those decisions?
Sure. There are a few different things. I think one of them, if kids are old enough to kind of express their likes and dislikes, which they always are, they just do it in different forms. So the 2-year-old might just use screaming as the main methodology to signify that. When you've got older kids, you can actually talk to them about these things. But if they can express what they like and don't like, that's kind of one guiding point. So if you have a kid who loves science and who loves space and things like that, then you know that they're going to love any kind of programming or whatever it is that NASA has to offer, or other kind of scientific institutions. Again, if you have a kid who's really into the environment and animals, then a lot of those live feeds are going to be wonderful. I know that a few different national parks in the US are also offering kind of live tours throughout those national parks. So that's a very cool one for a child who's really interested in the environment. You've got different actors, like you said, Michelle Obama is one person. You have a bunch of different actors like Josh Gad, aka Olaf, who's also doing, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was doing, I think at 7 p.m. every night on Twitter, he was reading books to kids. So if your kid is into Frozen, getting Olaf to read a book to them is probably like completely mind blowing to them. So, I think, and a lot of that content, one of the things we want to always make sure, of course, is that children are safe online. I think a lot of that kind of content is going to be pretty safe for them. Looking at, what Sesame Street is doing right now, what PBS Kids is doing right now, a lot of those will be, I think, some of the safest places that we can put kids, especially when we're talking about 2-year-olds, for some parents, either because of their work commitments or whatever it is. If they're a single parent, they'll find themselves with, say, in a 1-hour period during which they can't be very involved with whatever their child is doing, in which case they have to opt for something that we'll rarely recommend, which is for a 2-year-old to be left on the tech for a prolonged period of time without any kind of live, human in the moment supervision. So for those parents, you want to make sure, of course, that you're exposing them to things that are going to be safe, that there isn't going to be violence there isn't going to be advertising, or at least a minimal amount of advertising. You definitely don't want to do the whole put them on YouTube and turn on autoplay. I've heard horror stories about that over and over again. So you want to look at what your kids are interested, first of all, to make sure that they are going to be engaged and they are really going to be stimulated and they're going to be learning new things. Safety is the other thing that you of course want to be conscious of. So making sure that it's all, child-friendly platforms and content. And then you do want to think about restricting it in terms of time a little bit as well, so that they're not on that for, it's great to look at a tour through, say, a national park, but do you want a 2-year-old to be doing that for 2 hours? So first of all, they wouldn't be able to do it. It's way too long for them. But it's a little bit of kind of time fencing and, and just thinking about some of those things, thinking also about if you can spend time with them, which is ideal, especially for younger kids, try and do that at least for a portion of it. So if they're going to be looking at live feeds from zoos for, say, half an hour, try and spend at least 5 minutes doing that with them, either at the beginning or the end, talking about what they saw, what they liked, what they disliked, and so on. A lot of the research, some of it has been done by the American Academy of Pediatrics, has shown that when parents co-view and discuss the content that kids watch, especially when they're little, so kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, children are able to understand it a lot better. They're able to comprehend what they saw. It helps with building their literacy ability, vocabulary, and things like that. So co-viewing and co-using is another really big one. So as much as you can do that with your kids, especially when they're younger, the better that's going to be.
Yeah, totally. It makes for great conversation. Hey, what did you think about that?
Oh, yeah.
You can reflect. One thing that, as you were talking and you mentioned, I think Michelle Obama's reading, my parents, because we've been separated from my parents, they really miss my son Jax. And one thing that we had been doing was having them read, having my parents read for about 30 to 45 minutes, just read a bunch of books.
Yeah.
And, Jax has never picked up really a phone for play or a tablet. Right. He has watched his Sesame Street, but this has been, we'll put our phone down, and it's a little weird for me, but like me and my wife are swamped, but we'll put down the phone and my mom will just talk with him and read stories, and they're talking, and he's going and grabbing new books and reading to her and stuff. And it's like, she's kind of watching him for that 45 minutes, and it's worked out really quite nicely. So I guess my question is, for the parents of toddlers, like, is it the guidelines haven't changed, right? Where is it okay to bend? Is it okay to bend during this time?
Yeah. I think the guidelines have changed. They've flexed them a little bit. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is the main kind of organization, or really the only one that's given out more concrete guidelines on this. So, so it's kids below the age of 2 shouldn't really be exposed to any of it, with the exception of things like FaceTiming with, grandparents and things like that. And then past the age of 2, they have certain limitations that they recommend. So at this point, they've relaxed a little bit because they've had to, in the sense that your kids and you are going to be spending a lot more time using all these different forms of tech. So, I don't think they've changed the time frame too much, but I think they've just tried to express a little bit more kind of understanding and compassion to parents, and just make them feel like, you haven't ruined your child if today you expose them to, say, 5 hours or something like that. So for me, it's really it's always going back to mindful tech use and to meaningful tech use. For kids who are below the age of about 3 or 4, I do always advise parents to stay as close to 0 as you can. So then whatever that's going to be in your case, it's not going to be the same for everybody. But kids who are that young have so much going on kind of under the hood. Their brain is expanding, and so much stuff is changing so quickly. You want to try and kind of help that along in the most kind of natural ways as you possibly can. And a child who's that young, I always like to kind of draw a parallel with a tech terminology, but a kid who's that young, the only app that they need is the parent. There's nothing else that they need in that sense, meaning they cannot develop without it. So when they're that young, they don't need it. Things like the example that you gave in terms of grandparents reading to their kids, I think is an incredible thing to do. Grandparents are suffering a lot through this time with isolation and not being in touch with their kids and grandkids. I would always say that is a wonderful way of using tech with kids who are that young. Again, when your child is 2 or 3, they can't really, unless you give them a game-based kind of very stimulating content, they can't really sit still for too long anyway. So like you said, your son will jump up and he'll grab another book. He might grab a toy to show them if it suddenly occurs to him that it'd be fun to show grandma this particular toy, or he'll come up with different things to do. So I think it's okay in those cases to say, even have your laptop open and have a Zoom call and just let your kids run around while the grandparents are on there. Grandparents are happy just seeing their grandkids, so they'll be fine with that. So I think that kind of tech use where you're engaging family members is perfectly fine. Again, I would always stay away from, especially for little kids between kind of let's say 0, but say 2 up to 4 or 5. I would try and avoid leaving them on the tech alone, kind of unsupervised and not co-viewing it with them. I would try to minimize that as much as possible. If you are, again, exposing them to content, again, try and have it be something that's, like the live feeds from zoos, or, astronauts reading stories, or different actors reading stories, stuff like that. I would try to stay away from anything that is too stimulating and gamified. Obviously, any violence, I think that goes without saying, but anything that is overstimulating, because it does have a very strong and powerful impact on the brain. It will end up causing them to be more agitated, to be more nervous. It will be much harder for you to take it away from them. Their attention span is going to, if not shorten, it's going to stay very short. You're just going to end up with a very agitated 2-year-old, which nobody wants, I think. So if it is content, it should, I think, ideally be a kind of in the category of the social connecting side of it. So connecting with other family members, playing online. I heard an example the other day of kids playing different board games with each other, which is actually a wonderful exercise in empathy, also in putting yourself in another person's shoes, because you're moving your pieces and you're moving theirs as well. So you're kind of experiencing all of your friends' ups and downs. And if it's not stuff like that, it would be things that are a little bit more soothing, a little bit more nurturing, things like animals or nature, or the stories being read to you, or anything like that. Anything that's too gamified just gets kids riled up a little bit too much, and then you as the parent have to kind of deal with the outcome of that.
Speaking of outcomes, I have two thoughts, reflections, things, and because
sure.
We're talking toddlers, and I want to up it a little bit, maybe go to like tweens and teens right after this if we have time for it.
Yeah.
Not proud of this, but I want to share it because maybe this will help someone else out. But we just recently did potty training with my son, Jax, and he started off and he was pooping. This might be too much information for some, but he was starting off and he was pooping quite well. And then he sort of like regressed and he stopped, but he got like really constipated. And so we couldn't figure out how to get him to poop. And he loves Sesame Street. And again, not totally proud of this, but we said, all right, if you poop, you get to watch, 10 minutes of Sesame Street or whatever. Educational programming. Okay. Yeah. But it got to the point now where he was like constantly asking for Sesame Street, and it was just getting out of hand. So what we did, and this really worked, Teodora, and I'm sharing this because I hope maybe someone else out there, even if you have teens or tweens, this could help. We just told him, the TV's broken. The TV's broken, doesn't work anymore. And he kind of got it, and he stopped asking about it, and it like totally broke the habit.
Yeah.
And because he was having like, we were seeing the early signs, or at least because I work in the space, seeing these tech tantrums. And I was like, no, like the TV's broken.
Yeah.
We're done with it.
But meanwhile, did that help with the pooping?
He started to figure out that so what we did was we bought him a sticker book, and he loves cars. And he was able to pick now we replaced it with, he gets to pick a sticker, and he gets a customized sticker out of the book, and he puts it on a page. That's the new reward now, which would have been a better reward to begin with. And now he's pooping again. Now, the bad thing about it, that's kind of funny, is that he loves this sticker so much that he'll go and he'll try and squeeze out poops, and he'll have like these little, again, too much information here, just to get a sticker. And we're like, all right, so we're still working through that a little bit. But that was something that worked for us. Yeah.
And I think, it's a perfectly fine example, because this is one of the questions also that I get often, again, from parents of little kids. Is it okay to use screen time or cartoons on screens, whatever, as a reward? As a psychologist, and oftentimes psychologists who work with children, we don't like using too many rewards, because again, because of exactly what you said, right? Now he wants the sticker, that he'll engage in the behavior just to get the sticker. And that wasn't the point of the original exercise, but right. You can't control the way the brain works to that extent. We think we can, but you can't. It kind of misses the point, and it gets a life of its own. So I'm not crazy about rewards, but I think if we're just, again, keeping it very honest, our kids see us use screens as rewards too sometimes, right? In our language and the way we talk about things, oh, I can't wait to see that show at the end of the day, or, oh, wow, this is, sometimes, we might even say this is a great reward because I've worked so hard all day, and now I get to see, I get to watch my favorite show or whatever it is. So kids observe that behavior with us as well, and they observe it with other things too. We might say that, oh, this coffee is a treat, or we're getting a little bit of chocolate or something like that. So our kids are seeing us do it too. They understand the concept of you treat yourself to something when you do something well. So I think it's okay to use that sometimes. But again, like you said, the challenge then is to transition out of that. And that can be a little bit difficult, because again, kids learn very quickly when they're at that age. You only need to repeat something a couple of times, and that's it. They think that, when this, then that. Essentially, what we're doing with kids that age is we're building algorithms inside of their brains. We're teaching them rules about the way the world works. If you do this, then you get that. The problem, again, is, as you beautifully illustrated, that, there's a glitch somewhere along the way, and then we lose the point of the original exercise, and it becomes something else. So if any other parent out there has done a similar thing, I would say, please don't feel bad about it. I think it's perfectly okay to do that. Trying to transition out of it gently is important. And again, you can use something as simple as, well,
Sorry, I lost you for like 5 seconds about when you said you lost something, use something simply.
Yes. Oh, I think what I was saying was just use it for a limited amount of time, and then gently try and transition into something else. And you can use something as simple as, well, it broke, and so now we can't use it anymore, and that's it.
And of course, for me, like the next step for Jax would be, no, you poop just to poop, like, because that's what people do.
Sure.
No rewards. Yes. And then figuring out how to transition to that. And that'll happen. Yes. We'll do it gently. One thing that I do want to mention, you kind of mentioned now, and I definitely think that maybe there's some good to this. I think oftentimes, at least in America, we're so used to booking up our kids around the clock all the time. They got karate Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They got their tutors. They got baseball practice. They got Boy Scouts. And now for the first time, parents they're working at home. a lot of times, and our kids are being forced to sort of fend for themselves a little bit, and they're playing on their own a little bit. And I've seen this firsthand with my 2.5-year-old. And you mentioned, being on Zoom and having kids run around. I think it's totally okay, and it's actually a good thing. My son's imagination has totally run wild during this time. He's now got he's lining up all the stuffed animals on the couch, and he's like feeding them. So I'm curious, like, as to how this could even extrapolate to kids that are older, tweens and teens, or even adults, with just having more quiet time, more peace to look within, and being alone with our thoughts, and not being constantly stimulated. Can you open that up and speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where the way we use technology and to try and minimize it and weigh in places where we can is so important, because the problem a lot of times with the tech, especially with younger kids, is they're naturally very mindful. They're naturally very curious. They're naturally very imaginative, because all those connections haven't been built yet in their brain. They can think in far more expansive ways than we can. If you expose them too early or to too much tech, it's almost as though it feeds them the ideas. It gives them the answers. It kind of forces some of those connections to be made before they've had the opportunity to come up with 50 crazy ways for using a piece of paper or a pen, or all these incredible things that they can conjure up. And so when we limit technology, not just for our kids but for us as well, it allows us to be more productive, for there to be more output than the input. And so what we find with kids is that's exactly what happens with them. Their imagination runs wild when you just leave them kind of with either just the few toys they have, or even just a few kind of random objects that you have around the house. Like the number of times I've seen kids at birthday parties receive gifts, pull out the gift, and then play with the box for an hour, and just you'll be fascinated with the box. It's because there's so much output coming out of their brain, because it's just so expansive. And I think that's something that we can do really well with our kids, and that we can help them with right now, but that we can do for ourselves as well, to really have those quiet moments where we really do just let our imagination come out, and just see whatever comes out of it, and just accept that. I think our imagination is one of our, I think, strongest tools right now. One of the kind of the most powerful things that we can do in this moment to help ourselves. We're physically kind of caged up, but our imagination is just boundless. It can take us wherever we want to go. And so I think that's where it's important to try and tone down the tech a little bit, or the consumption of too much tech, and really give ourselves a little bit of that empty space and time, just to kind of see what comes out. Like you were saying, our kids nowadays are so overbooked that they really rarely have that time to just sit with nothing and just kind of see what happens. Oftentimes what happens is that they say, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm bored." And then Mommy and Daddy freak out because they're not used to their kids being bored. And then they'll throw anything their way, just say, "Here, go, occupy yourself, do something," whether it's tech-based or not tech-based. And we forget how important it is that we have those periods when there isn't anything there kind of telling us what to do and what to think and how to feel, when we're able to create that all on our own. And it's wonderful to observe how kids do that, because there's just no limits to their capacity to do that. And so I think one of the great outcomes from this can be our kind of increased creativity and productivity. But I think in order for that to happen, we really do need to keep our tech consumption in check, and make sure that we give ourselves the time and the space, and our kids really for free play, basically, for both kids and their parents.
For sure. Cool. So we're coming up on time here, but I want to let you plug, and I want to have people figure out where they can learn a little bit more about you and all your work. But I got to ask this one last question about video games.
Oh, sure.
Video games. I've been spending so much time with the kids, and I never grew up as a gamer, and I still don't really game, but I get it. And I think video games have their place, right? Just like anything, like everything in moderation. As it relates to what you're just saying, you know, I think a lot about like the video games, they're moving so fast and they're so stimulating. And like, can you just open up about video games, particularly now? What is an acceptable amount of usage? Are video games a quality way for kids to connect? And what should we be thinking about when guiding our families and our children for acceptable, appropriate video game consumption?
Yeah, that's such a big question. And I do always hesitate in, again, giving a kind of cookie cutter answer. I mean, I don't think there is one, because it can really vary. Like you said, on the one hand, a lot of kids are using games now, especially multiplayer games, to keep up that kind of the social component of their life, especially when you're looking at kids, I don't know, say 10, 11, 12 years and older. One of the things, of course, as a parent, you always want to make sure is that you follow the kind of the age guides and restrictions and things like that to make sure that you're not exposing a child who's far too young to content that's really not appropriate to them. I think it's important to again look at how your child is using that form of tech, if they are a fan of any type of whatever the game might be. If it really is encouraging social connection, if it really is encouraging problem solving, if it is encouraging elements of social emotional interaction where they're having to coordinate and they're having to balance out what they want and what their friends want, or what to develop some of those skills. But I think it goes back to what for me is one of the foundational principles of any form of tech use. And that is, to be aware of the way that it has all been built. So, Minecraft or Roblox or whatever it is, they weren't built to be used for 3 minutes and then to be put down. That's not the point, right? The people who were creating these games made them so that we would spend a lot of time using them. And the same is true for, say, Instagram or Facebook or whatever other form of tech it is, right? It is supposed to be very immersive. It is really supposed to keep you in. And I think, when I talk to parents about what some of kind of the basic foundations for helping your child become a really healthy consumer and a kind of good, responsible digital citizen is, one of the factors is to really teach children about how all this tech is made, and things like persuasive design and the attention economy, right? So that they understand why they're so pulled into those games, to really have that conversation with them. And again, to really talk about creating some fences around it and to limit their time on it so that they are able to pull out kind of all the best aspects of that, and to be able to still stay social and still be creative and still be productive, but not to spend, I don't know, if they're, say, 12 years old, to spend 10 hours a day on that game. So that's definitely not going to help them in any way, shape, or form. And to also know that is probably going to be one of the battlegrounds for you as a parent. You probably will have to argue about it, again, because the game is created to be immersive. It's not created for you to just pick it up for a couple minutes and put it down, right? That's not the point. And it's important to remember that a lot of these kind of gaming businesses hire psychologists in order to create these games, to make them more immersive and to pull you in a little bit more. So again, I think it is okay for kids to engage with these games in age-appropriate ways, making sure that they're safe, not interacting with strangers and all these different things. So to identify what are the benefits of you playing Minecraft. What is it? What is it that you love about it? What is it that's engaging? Can I play with you for a little bit too? So be that geeky parent who's going to spend a little bit of time and see what it's about for them, because then you build that connection with them. You show them that you care. You show them that it's not just about you being the authority and saying you may only play it for 15 minutes. Why? Because I said so. But you're actually going to appreciate that they love playing this game for these and these reasons, but also that you are going to put a cap on it, and you are going to say that's wonderful and I want you to experience that, but more than say an hour or half an hour is actually detrimental to you. And I need you to trust me on this. And so it is a little bit of a conversation for sure.
Yeah. And I love your approach of teaching them the why and the how about the technology too. And my hope is that within the next few years, and some private schools are already doing, and they're using some of the work that Common Sense Media is doing to actually equip teachers with resources to incorporate it into the curriculum. And that's really why I'm so passionate about doing what I do. And also the things that you do too is coaching up parents on how to have these conversations in the right way, because these are very much new world problems that we're facing. So with that being said, we're coming up on time here. I know you have another call, but Teodora, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and access some of your amazing work?
Sure. So the easiest place really to find all the information in one place would definitely be my website. So that's topcoaching.com. So TEOP you can find a lot of resources. If you go to my blog page, you can find a few of the articles that I've written about how to parent in the age of technology. There's also one blog post there entitled social nearing, which is a term that I've liked to use, physical distancing and social nearing.
I like that a lot.
Where you'll find
that before. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I just like the concept of that, of trying to use tech in the best ways possible to really stay close to each other. We know based on a lot of the neuroscience research that isolation hurts the human brain. So we need to come together, and we need to bond, and we need to feel that we're all in this together. So if you take a look at that article in particular, I shared a lot of these resources that I was talking about before, a lot of these live streams and a lot of these readings for children and a bunch of that stuff. But yeah, if you just go to my website, you'll find all that information there. And if you'd like any additional resources or you have further questions, you can just contact me through the website as well.
Cool. Teodora, thank you so much for your time. I hope you're staying happy
David.
and healthy. And
trying to.
Yes. And I'm looking forward to continuing to get to know you better and build a friendship. And thank you for all the amazing work you're putting out into the world.
Of course. Thank you so much for this invitation, David. And I hope you stay safe and healthy, all of our viewers as well. Just try and band together and try and make the most of what's happening right now.
I'm right there with you. Thank you, Teodora. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you enjoy the show, please make sure to subscribe and give us a rating and review on iTunes. You can also connect with us at americaoffline.info for more great content and to register for upcoming events. Thanks for listening. Now it's time to get offline.